All right, welcome to From Self Doubt to Self Trust. I am Dr. Amanda Ryan Fear, and I am an advanced certified life coach. So, basically, what that means is I help women learn to work with their brains to clear the limiting beliefs and negative thinking that's holding them back so they can connect to their hearts and rediscover what they really want from life. So I have found that over my own life, anytime I face a challenge, the answer is always self trust. How much do I trust myself to get through this challenge? And how much am I going to be able to set the negative thinking aside and set the self doubt aside and just keep going? So, between getting an advanced degree, becoming a parent, buying a farm, starting my own business, all of these challenges, there's been plenty of self doubt. Like our brains love to catastrophize. And so, my brain, having a human brain just like yours, my brain is always like, okay, this is where we die. This is where we screw it up and you end up broken alone. So, I found the answer is always, always, always how do we get past those limiting beliefs and how do we trust ourselves more? So that's what today's topic is all about being able to move from that constant state of self-doubt to having more trust in yourself. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to go over first what self-trust is and why I think it's the key ingredient for building confidence and accomplishing anything you want in your life. Number two, 3 ways to build self trust that you've never tried before. And finally, an opportunity to continue to build self trust so that you can stop exhausting yourself trying to control everything outside of you and start trusting that no matter what happens, you're going to be fine and you're going to figure it out because you trust yourself. So, first, what is self trust? Let's define that. Um, If you feel so compelled, drop a allergies. Drop a line in the chat of what you think self-trust even means. Okay. So self-trust is basically the building block of self-confidence. It's having your own back and refusing to beat yourself up no matter what. So basically, it's knowing that no matter what happens in your life, whether it's a tiny bump in the road or a major catastrophe, you are going to figure it out and you're going to be okay. And that's really where confidence comes from. We tend to think that confidence comes from outside of us, like the experiences we have and what other people say about us. And really outside validation. But really, confidence comes from how much we trust ourselves to figure things out and how much we trust ourselves to be kind to ourselves throughout the process. So, when you don't trust yourself, you waste time and energy trying to control everything around you. So, think about that. When you don't trust yourself to figure things out, you try to control the stock market. You try to control your boss. You try to control your coworkers. You try to control what they're thinking about you. You try to control what your partner's thinking about you or what your partner does. We basically waste all of this time and energy trying to control things outside of us so that we can feel safe. But I'm sure that you know from decades of life on this planet that you can't actually control outside circumstances. You can't control other people. The only thing that we can control, going back to kindergarten, is ourselves. And that's actually super liberating because once you realize that you don't have to control everything outside of you, you become much better able to roll with the punches. Like if you've ever seen a tree, I don't know names of a lot of trees, but a tree bending in the wind. That's someone who has a strong sense of self trust, or that's like someone who has a strong sense of self trust. So we're able to be more flexible because we're not so rigidly trying to control all of the things outside of us. So when you don't trust yourself, you also are constantly seeking reassurance and advice from others instead of tuning into your own wisdom about how you feel about the situation. You solicit opinions from others around you when an important decision must be made. And you put off making decisions and procrastinate because you find it so much easier, I put in quotes, um, to sit with the uncertainty of it because that's a familiar place compared to the fear that you made the wrong decision. You avoid tuning into your needs and desires and you disconnect instead. I mean, how many times have you just kept going, knowing that you need to take time to take care of yourself, but then somebody else needs something? And so you disconnect from what it is that you need to keep going forward. And I'm guilty of this too. You overestimate the perspective of others and undervalue your own thoughts and instincts. So perhaps in a meeting, you have an idea, and then somebody speaks first and shares the opposite of that idea. So you just let your idea go because you think, oh, well, yeah, their idea has more value, has more merit than my idea. You're always fearing that you're making the wrong choice. You ruminate on what could have been if you'd taken a different path. Excuse me, you compare your choices to others' decisions. You're quick to believe your own negative opinions of yourself, right? Like, oh, I really screwed up that presentation. Yeah, I did. Where we have this whole like critical panel in our heads and we agree with them. And then finally, when you don't have a solid sense of self trust, you don't recognize and believe in your own innate value and worth. So, what does it look like when you do have a solid sense of self trust? If you have a strong sense of trust in yourself, this means that you have a good relationship with yourself. You trust yourself and your inner voice. So, not only are you connected to that inner voice, where it's so many of us are disconnected from it, but you trust that voice. So instead of constantly feeling anxious, you tend to feel calmer and at peace. And that's for several reasons. That's because you're not trying to control everything outside of you. And you know that no matter what happens, you're not going to be mean to yourself afterwards. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. And you know that anything that happens in your life, you're going to figure it out. And that's been the biggest game changer for me. So I was diagnosed with anxiety back in college, but I'm sure that if I went to see a therapist in elementary school or even earlier, I probably would have been diagnosed with anxiety. But and I've had all the therapy, I've had a variety of different medications, and really nothing has helped as much as learning to manage my mind. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, and building trust in myself because I don't have to control what everybody else does, right? I don't have to control what they think of me. I just get to be that willow tree. There's the tree I was looking for, and bend in the wind. So people who have good self trust feel confident in their decisions. Their relationships are healthier and they tend to have a higher level of emotional intelligence. So, a good sense of self trust means that you take care of yourself. You know you can get through anything difficult that comes your way, and you aren't afraid to stay close to your core life values. You have clear boundaries and you don't allow people to overstep them. You know you're not perfect, but you love yourself anyway. You're prepared to try and fail. And we're going to talk more about that further on in this class. How the idea of being able to not only tolerate failure, but embrace failure will help you grow so much faster. You know how to ask for what you need and what you want. You trust yourself to navigate life and make good decisions. And you can let your guard down and show up fully, authentically as yourself. Sound good? All right. So, why don't we just naturally have more self trust if it's such a good thing, right? It can be particularly hard for people who are raised as women um, to trust themselves. And this is not because of anything natural to women, it's not a biological thing. It's because we're socialized, we're raised to look outside of ourselves for the answer. So, if you've looked at the headlines of fashion magazines or women's magazines, they're always like, "Is your hair turning people off? Are you wearing the wrong jeans? How to know if he really likes you?" Right? And that's just one example of how our culture communicates to women that we're doing it wrong, and if we trust our own instincts, we're gonna get it wrong. And we need to ask other people how to do it right. So, we're also taught to be super sensitive to what everybody else thinks about us. And so we become really sensitive to other people's emotions, to other people's moods, to what other people think about us. And this had a biological root. I mean, up until even not that long ago, and still in some cultures, women have had to and still have to be pleasing, right, to a man in order to survive. So if a woman was argumentative or difficult to get along with, then she would be sent away. So women had to be pleasing to their fathers first to have a home and have resources, and then they had to be pleasing to a husband to have a home and to have resources. And earlier than that, we had to be pleasing to our tribe so we didn't get kicked out of the tribe. So there's this biological basis for people pleasing, but that makes it really hard to trust yourself because if you're looking to make everybody else happy, then we lose track of who we are and what we need and what we want. And I see this a lot in clients where they come to me after decades of people pleasing and putting everybody else first, that they just are completely disconnected with themselves. And so we do the work of figuring out, like, what is it that I actually enjoy? What do I want to do with my time? This is particularly when a woman becomes an empty nester, where she's no longer focused so much on just the busyness of having kids around, where she has time to look around and be like, "Oh, I have some time. What do I want to do with it?" So men are generally taught to be leaders and innovators, and both of those require a high degree of self-trust. And women are generally taught to put everyone else first, put their own needs last, and look to others for validation. So, no wonder we don't have a very high degree of self trust. It's not something we're taught, and it's not something that we get to practice throughout our lives. So, I want to teach you the 3 steps to building self trust that have been the most helpful for me and that have been the most helpful for the women that I work with. So, yeah, without further ado, the first one is honor commitments to yourself. So I want you to imagine that you have a friend, and this is a fairly new friend, and you make a date to meet each other for coffee. And you're excited about it. You're looking forward to getting to know this person better. And she texts you at the last minute. She says, "I'm so sorry. Something came up at work. I can't make it." So you think, okay, I mean, that's a bummer, but that's fine. So you make plans for 2 weeks in advance or 2 weeks from then. And you're sitting in the coffee shop. You're excited to see your new friend. And she texts you again. She's like, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I have to pick my kid up at soccer. I'm not going to make it." So the first time, what would you think? I'm guessing you probably would think, yeah, life is really busy. That's a bummer. Part of you would be like, but this is great. Now I have some free time. And you wouldn't really think anything of it. The second time, you would start to think, is this someone I can actually trust? Is this someone who's going to flake on me every time? So now I want you to think about every time that you have made a commitment to yourself and you flaked on yourself. So for a lot of people, this looks like making a commitment to go to the gym or go for a run. And then inevitably, somebody in your life needs something from you and you push your own commitments to yourself to the side. I've seen this so many times. And I've done it in the past too, before I realized how important it is to keep commitments to ourselves. So, just like with another person, just like you would lose trust with a friend who didn't show up for whatever commitment they had made with you, you lose trust with yourself when you bail on yourself. So, I want you to think about, that advice of like treat yourself, of how you would treat a friend, because it's so true. I mean, we have a tendency to uphold commitments to other people more regularly than we uphold commitments to ourselves. And so think about when you put something on your calendar for yourself. I know the logic behind pushing it when something else comes up is, and I've heard this so many times, is my time is the only time I can control. So I can't push aside the dentist appointment, but I can push aside the run that I said I was going to take myself on, that I was going to go on. But I want you to start honoring your commitments to yourself as as they're as valuable or even more valuable than your commitments to other people. Because once you start doing this, you'll notice that you can start to trust yourself just a little bit more. So I would encourage you to start with micro commitments. So I'm a big fan of the 1% change, because if you identify it all as a perfectionist, as I am and I'm working through, then you're going to think, okay, I'm going to make these commitments to myself, and I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. And then I am going to eat right. And I am going to leave work by 5 so that I have time with my family. I mean, all of those things are great commitments to do over time. But the problem with biting off a bunch at one time is inevitably you're going to fail, and then you're going to get down on yourself, and then you're going to lose self-trust. So pick a teeny tiny commitment, pick a micro commitment. Like maybe sometime next week, you are going to take the dog for a walk, 20-minute walk. Put that on your calendar, treat that time as if it's sacred, and then honor that commitment with yourself. Because just like with a friend, if you'd been bailing on a friend for a really long time, you would need to build that trust back up with your friend. We need to build the trust back up with ourselves. Okay. So if you have your worksheet out, there is a place in the worksheet to write down one micro commitment you can make to yourself over the next week. Make sure you do that. Okay. Number 2. Here's one. I mean, I love making and keeping commitments with myself, but I also really love this tool. It's to have your own back no matter what. So keep in mind, this is a practice. The last thing I want is for you to start beating yourself up when you catch yourself beating yourself up. But how often have you had a conversation with somebody else, or perhaps you've led a meeting, or you've done something else, and afterwards, there just is this torrent of self-criticism, right? Like, oh, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe that I didn't say this. I can't believe I couldn't answer that question. What is wrong with me? Totally normal, by the way. Like, this is just part of having a human brain. But if we don't check it, if we don't keep it in check, then we're going to erode trust with ourselves. Because imagine the same friend who kept flaking on you for coffee was also really mean to you. Like, she's constantly telling you you're stupid or that you screwed up, whatever it was that you just did. You probably wouldn't spend any more time with her, would you? So, same thing with yourself. If we're always mean to ourselves, if we're always beating ourselves up, that's going to cause a higher level of anxiety. So I noticed this back in my previous career. I was a high school assistant principal, and I led a lot of meetings in that job. And I would be really anxious going into certain meetings where I had to be prepared to answer a lot of questions. I had to be prepared to, I don't know, exude a leadership energy, run the meeting, make sure everything stayed on track. You get the idea. So I'd be super anxious. And I realized that's because I was trying to control what everybody else was doing, right? I was trying to make sure they didn't go off topic. I was trying to make sure that they didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. I was trying to make sure that, you get the idea, controlling everything else. And then I would leave these meetings and I would go over everything I did wrong, right? How familiar is that? And over time, I would dread these meetings more and more. And it wasn't the meetings, I later figured out. It was because I would be so mean to myself afterwards. It'd be like if you were learning to do something. Let's imagine you're learning to swim and you hire a coach to help you learn how to swim. And after every workout, the coach tells you everything you did wrong. Inevitably, like over time, you would stop wanting to swim. You would stop going to your swim lessons and you probably would stop swimming because you'd be like, this sucks. But maybe first you would notice that you were feeling super anxious before your swim lessons, but not really know why. It's because your coach is being so dang mean to you. Same thing. When you make a commitment to stop being mean to yourself, everything changes because you finally feel like you can trust yourself. You have your own back. You're not the mean girl in the corner who's always making snide remarks toward yourself. That's why this is the second tool for building self-trust. Have your own back no matter what. Okay. Yeah. And what I want to say about that too is that you're 100% in control of how you talk to yourself. Now, there's a caveat with that because part of having a human brain means that our brain skews naturally towards negativity. That's how our brain keeps us alive. So if you're ever wondering why you have so many negative thoughts, that's natural because your brain isn't going to keep you alive by being like, oh my gosh, everything's wonderful. And I should just take a nap here in the middle of this highway that nothing possibly could go wrong. Our brain keeps us alive by scanning for danger all the time. And over time, that's become, since there are fewer predators out there to eat us, over time, the danger has been more like danger of embarrassment or danger of feeling shame. And so our brain's trying to protect us from feeling those uncomfortable emotions. And so your brain's always scanning for like, how are you going to screw this up? How are you going to cause yourself to feel shame? But once you commit to not beating yourself up, once you become aware that that's your brain's habit and just over time catch yourself when you start to beat yourself up, again, please be compassionate with yourself because the worst is when you catch yourself beating yourself up and then you beat yourself up for it. So don't do that. It's a process, it's a muscle you develop. Okay, treat yourself with kindness. It's hard being a human. All right, next, third and final tool is build up a failure tolerance. So many people find failure uncomfortable at best, right? Women in particular have been socialized to attribute failure to their lack of ability. When we feel like something has gone wrong, we blame ourselves. We naturally look to ourselves for what we could change, which isn't the worst thing. I mean, again, you can't control other people, but then when it becomes a beat yourself up fest, that's not helpful. Excuse me. And also, when we think we've failed at something, we usually take that as a sign that we should give up and move on, right? Like there have been so many times in my business that I could have been like, well, it's not working out. I'm a failure. I should give up. But I'm committed. I have to keep recommitting to meeting each of my goals and continuing to go. Because really, the only failure is if I give up. So you have to redefine what failure is for yourself. We have this really amorphous idea of failure, and we don't even probe what that means. Like we don't question what that means for ourselves. We just think, oh, I might fail, I'm not going to do it. I was having this conversation with my husband the other day because he really likes to grow things. He likes to grow microgreens in particular. And what he would love is to have a part-time business growing microgreens, selling them to restaurants and grocery stores. And so he's been he's been putting some scaffolding together to make that happen. And he's like, yeah, I don't know why. I just can't get myself motivated to do this. And of course, being the coach that I am, I asked him, well, I started to ask him questions and I said, "Well, what's holding you back?" And he said, and this was very self-aware for him. He said, "Well, I'm just really afraid it's not going to work. I'm afraid I'm going to fail." And I said, "Well, how would you know you've failed? Like, what would be the precise moment where you tell yourself, okay, I've failed. It's time to quit?" He thought about it for a while and he said, "Well, I guess if I don't make any money." And I said, "Okay, you don't make any money. Is that in the first month? Is that in the first 6 months? Is that in the first year?" You get where I'm going with this. At what point would you say, "I've not made any money, I've failed"? You wouldn't do that because we constantly are monitoring and adjusting. We're constantly tweaking things. We're constantly learning. So if you want to succeed at anything in life, you have to learn to not only tolerate failure, but embrace failure. Because failure, even though culturally we're conditioned to be terrified of failure, right? How many times in school have you been told, like, an F is horrible, that's when you die? And so we're taught that failure isn't this thing where, yeah, you make a mistake, you learn from it, and you grow. We're taught that you fail, that's it, you're done, right? And so you start a new business and you think, okay, well, I might fail and then I'll have to quit and get a different job. But no, failure, first of all, is, like I said, kind of this abstract concept. You have to define what that would even mean. And usually failing means to quit. So you have to fail, though, if you want to move forward in your life. If you want to stay in your comfort zone for the rest of your life, by all means, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't. But I'm guessing that if you're participating in this class, you would like to learn and grow and get more from your life. And I hate to tell you this, but that involves embracing failure. Because the more failures you accumulate, the faster you learn and the faster you reach success. So, failure tolerance is not something most people are born with. It's a skill that you can develop. And the more resilient you are in the face of failure, the more successful you'll be. So, in order to build this failure tolerance, I hate to tell you this, but you have to fail. But you're already practicing not beating yourself up and being kind to yourself. So, hopefully, that will help take the sting out of whatever it is that you're defining as failure. So, for my business, I have an actual fail plan. So, it's a list of 50 things I'm working through doing that each one has the potential for quote unquote failure. So, when I do one, I cross it off my list. And I don't even contemplate like whether I've failed in it or not. It's something to do, to tweak, to learn from, to keep going. And my goal is to keep failing until I reach the level of success that I want to reach. So, learning and growth involves failing. And I really want to caution you against taking failure as this abstract concept and letting it be the reason that you don't pursue something. Okay. So, over the last few minutes, I've shared with you what self-trust means, how it and a lack of it shows up in your life, and 3 ways to build self-trust. So, keeping commitments to yourself, having your own back, and increasing your failure tolerance. So, your work to do now is figure out what commitment, what micro commitment you're going to keep to yourself, set with yourself, and keep and practice that. Practice having your own back. So, notice how you're talking to yourself and then remind yourself, oh, I don't do that anymore. I'm actually nice to myself now. I don't talk to myself like that anymore. And then finally, create your own fail plan. What's your big goal? What do you want to achieve? Do you want a promotion at work? Do you want to quit your job and finding a new one? Do you want to start your own business? Do you want to run a marathon? Do you want to eat more vegetables? Whatever your goal is, how can you fail your way towards it? Because the more you fail and the more you realize that you'll survive failure and that failure really isn't actually a thing, like it's not like a math test, right? Where you do it and then you either pass or you fail. It's all iterations. It's all like, it's more subtle than that, but our brains are very black and white. Our brains are like, you succeed or you fail, but it's all growth. It's all learning. So create a fail plan for yourself. What are all of the big risks you could take or the little risks that you could take that can help you learn and grow and keep moving forward? Okay. So that's your homework. Right now, I want you to take a moment to envision how your life would be different if you trusted yourself more. Maybe you'd stop ruminating over decisions and waking up in the middle of the night going through the spin cycle of trying to make a decision. First of all, what I want to tell you about trying to make a decision is there's no such thing as trying to make a decision. It's like if I told you to grab a piece of paper and try to tear it in half. You can't just try to tear it in half. You either tear it in half or you don't. Same thing with making a decision. When we tell ourselves we're trying to make a decision, all we're doing is wasting time. And usually the fear that we have about making the wrong decision is because A, we don't trust ourselves. And that's because actually there is no B, just A, we don't trust ourselves. And that is because we have bailed on ourselves so many times in the past. We have been mean to ourselves when we've decided we've made the wrong decision. And we've decided that we've failed and it's time to give up. That's why decisions are so hard. But that's another workshop I teach is decision making 101. So again, we're envisioning what life would be like with more self-trust. You're not going to ruminate over decisions anymore. Or when you catch yourself doing it, you'll be like, oh yeah, I don't do this anymore. You'd have more time and energy because you can say no to dinner with your in-laws when you don't really want to go. You can finally take your family to Disney and not spend all the time you're in line checking your work email because you feel too guilty not to. You could spend a Sunday afternoon on the couch with a book, regardless of how many things are on your to-do list, no matter how many snarky comments your family makes about how you're not doing anything. So thinking about what your life would be like with more self-trust, I want you to jot one thing down, whatever you're writing on right now. Jot one thing that would be different about your life if you had more self-trust. You can do that now. So you with more self-trust, I like to call you 2.0. You 2.0 is you, only amplified. I don't want to say better because there's absolutely nothing wrong with you right now. It's you, but more of the person that you're becoming and you want to become. You 2.0 is the person that you're 100% capable of becoming. You're only holding yourself back with limiting beliefs, negative thoughts, and self-doubt. Perhaps you 2.0 takes time for piano lessons because that's something you've always wanted to do. You 2.0 schedules time on the weekends to simply do nothing. Maybe you 2.0 sets boundaries around her time and energy and says things to no that aren't a yes. She asks for what she wants, no matter how scary it is. She lets herself dream. She's more comfortable in her skin. Think about it. 5, 10, 15 years from now, what will be important to you? And what are you doing right now to cultivate that? How do you want to show up when you walk into a room? You get to be that person. I 100% believe that you get to be that person, but you have to believe it too. So I had mentioned that the third thing that we were going to work on in this class is other opportunities for continuing to build self-trust and confidence. And creating you 2.0 and building the self-trust in yourself, that was kind of redundant, and the confidence that you need to become that person, that's exactly the work that we do in Metamorphosis. That's my signature 3-month coaching program. And I would love to invite all of you to join us. If you've ever felt like you're in survival mode, that you've got to get through this day, through this week, through this month, this to-do list, this stage of your career, this stage of raising children, and if you've been waiting for something outside of you to change, you have to get in this group. If you've ever felt yourself wondering, is this all there is? I've done all these things and this is what I get. And you're hoping that the answer to that is no, there's so much more, then you need to join us. We're making magic happen. And if you ever found yourself feeling overwhelmed, unfulfilled, and stuck, then this is the group for you. So this offer isn't for everyone. It's only for women who are ready to create themselves 2.0, ready to make that change in their lives, where they're no longer beating themselves up. They're no longer the victims of self-doubt, where they actually can learn to manage their thinking, tap into their hearts, and go after this, whatever it is you want in this next phase of your life. So the work that we do together in Metamorphosis is threefold. And it's in a supportive community of women with brains just like yours. So everyone else will be suffering from self-doubt. Everyone else will have a critical brain. Everyone else will be trying to create this new stage of life that actually feels good together. So the first thing we do is it's the clearing phase. So we clear limiting beliefs, we clear old stories, we clear negative self-talk, and you start to experience some really significantly life-changing mindset shifts. All it takes sometimes is one shift in how you're thinking in the script that you're telling yourself about yourself and your life to change everything else in your life. So this becomes your inner up level. And this is when you'll start to feel more energy and more hope. You'll start saying no to things so you have more time. I don't know if you can hear my cats playing in the blinds behind me right now. I have 3 little kittens. They're busy. The second phase is to connect. Connect with your authentic self and true desires and start hearing your intuition loud and clear and build the self-trust you need to start taking action. And from there, we create. So you create an action plan to move forward, overcome obstacles, release fear and resistance, and learn to take massive action in the direction of your dreams. And this whole time, you'll receive weekly coaching from me. You'll receive ongoing support in our online group, and you'll have a whole group of women, myself included, to cheer you on. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite groups to run. So what you won't have is lots of homework that you don't have time for. You won't have to fake it till you make it. You won't have to pretend to be someone else. You won't have to show up any differently than you already are. You won't have to take yourself on dates unless you want to. So enrollment is open now, and we begin the 3rd week of October. And the early bird discount expires next Tuesday, so October 10th. So if you're at all interested, you should act quickly. You are welcome to send me a message, send me an email if you're interested, or you can go to my website, amandaryanfear.com, and click on programs, and it'll take you to all of the programs that I offer. Click on Metamorphosis, and you'll get all of the information. So once you read through it, and if it sounds like it's something for you, if it makes your heart smile, then apply. What you'll do is you'll click on the Apply Now button, fill out a short application, and then if I think that you're a good fit for the program, I'll reach out to schedule a call to talk about it. All right, friends. So 3 ways to build self-trust. Make and keep commitments to yourself. Stop bailing on yourself. Be nice to yourself, right? And my brain just blanked on the 3rd one. You tell me what the 3rd one is. Fail lots. Build a fail plan. Learn to embrace failure because you're being kind to yourself. All right. Thank you so much for coming today. If you have questions, please reach out. I'm super accessible and I love answering questions. If you're trying this work and it gets sticky, if something comes up, let me know. I'm happy to coach you through it via email. All right, friends, see you later.